really got to try on that left-hand side. What happened?
Oh, but I've gone up and over and bloody head over biscuit. It wasn't enough stability there for myself, but no, I was busting for a bit of meat this game. It didn't seem to work out.
Hello, cheers, and welcome to the Scrum of the Earth podcast, the weekly show for news, reviews, great interviews, and so much more all about the world of rugby. As always, my name is David Lawrence. I'm an American rugby fan who follows the game wherever I can find it all over the globe. If you'd like to get in touch, well, I'm always easy to find on your socials, and you can always just drop an email to thescrumoftheearth@gmail.com. Well, as usual, there was a ton of rugby on offer this weekend. I tried to catch most of it, so why don't we get this thing started? Okay, as always, we start with our current updates, and I had a small piece of good news this week. So at my work, we use this app to sort of track and encourage employee well-being. And, most of you have probably encountered something similar. You gain points by walking X number of steps each day, by tracking good habits, yada, yada. Pretty standard. And then you eventually cash in your points for rewards in the forms of merch, gift certificates, a ton of other stuff. So I recently helped plan an absolutely bonkers event that put us to the test, me and my whole team, but patting myself on the back a little bit, I killed it, made the whole thing come off really swimmingly, despite about 6 million obstacles. So usually, this is the type of work that goes completely unacknowledged, but shockingly, the main organizer realized just how much extra blood, sweat, and tears that we'd all put into it and heaped a lavish amount of points on us in appreciation. Well, I was able to turn around and convert those points into a brand new guitar, a lovely Takamine electric acoustic, right when I've been in the market for just such an item. Like, it's a beautiful tobacco burst cutaway, a single cutaway. It's gotten great reviews. I just can't wait. It's supposed to show up tomorrow, and I am very excited. So every now and then, I guess the system actually kind of seems to work. Anyway, rest of time, we are going to skip news and thoughts of the week. That, of course, brings us right to our reviews. As always, we're going to start with our international action, then move over to the usual competitions we cover here. The boringly named Rugby Championship has ended, but there was still a multitude of games to watch. Like, what a time of year. This may be the first time I've realized it. Is October the best month for rugby in general? Like, is there any other month that can hold a candle? I mean, December comes to mind, late December, early January, but I'm pretty sure this is the apex of the calendar, and I am enjoying the crap out of it. Okay, so getting started with the second leg of the WXV, there were some very interesting results last week. Would we be in for any more upsets or shockers? In the WXV1, my USA Eagles were matched up against an angry France team, smarting from the hiding at the hands of the Canadians. I didn't come into this expecting a win for us, and it was a pretty reasonable final score, 14-22. I was feeling kind of bitter about it, but Bill from the Eagles Overseas podcast had some really positive takeaways, and somehow it just made me feel a lot better. Bill, man, thanks for that. Speaking of Canada, they were up next facing an Ireland team that had just achieved lofty new heights by beating the world champions, and I wondered, if Canada won, would that catapult them all the way to the world #1 ranking? I mean, then I thought about it, the Red Roses would have to lose too, right? Either way, the Giant Slayers from last week were no match for the women of the Great White North, who won 21-8, though they didn't get any points at all in the second half, so they definitely have some work-ons, I suppose. On Sunday, can't even believe I'm saying this, but I had New Zealand penciled in for another loss as they squared off against the Red Roses of England. Sadly, I was right for a change, with England getting 9 tries in the win, including a hat-trick from Jess Breach, who possesses one of the all-time great rugby names. England, of course, remain undefeated. Ho-hum, 31-49 all told. You know what? I'm just going to go ahead and say it. The Red Roses are the Leinster of international rugby. Like, undeniably good, but utterly impossible to root for. So, over in the WXV2, we began with Wales versus Italy, two teams really in need of a win. I came in fairly late to find Wales down 5-8 entering that final quarter. That was still the score with under 2 minutes to go, with Wales putting together a really promising looking drive. They were knocking on the door with the penalty advantage as well as the clock slipped past 80. But then a horrifying sight as Lakey George, she went down with what looked like a bad knee injury. She was taken off the field right at the end of the match there. Potentially huge blow. I have been told since then she's been ruled out for the rest of this series at least. Somehow, beyond all expectation, at least my expectation, Italy's defense held, getting hands under a ball that otherwise would have been a try, and That was it. Italy getting the first win of the competition. Wales are left with more questions than ever. Kira Bevan was clearly distraught as her team's hopes were dashed. Just a tough watch there. I think I better check in with my pal Julia to see if she needs to be talked off the ledge or anything. Japan, they were nominal hosts to Scotland on Saturday. Another nice but not particularly high-scoring win for the Scots, squeaking by Japan 13-19. Shout out to Emma Orr, who had another rampaging performance. How good is she right now? And then finally, it was a Southern Hemisphere clash between South Africa and Australia. Australia, they're on a little mini roll here, building some momentum with their second win in a row, 26-33, and that was despite South Africa scoring 14 points in maybe the final 6 minutes of the game, but the let-off was definitely a little bit worrying. So over in the WXV3, of course, we had Madagascar versus Hong Kong, China. Another tough day for Madagascar, falling 7-38. The Netherlands, that got shut out by heavily favored Spain, but held them to just 20 points. I suppose that's a minor victory. And, of course, we had a Pacific Islands clash between Fiji and Samoa, and it was a huge victory for Samoa, 17-45 in that one. Okay. That brings us over to the FPC. It was the Premiership final featuring the Waikato women versus the Canterbury women. Holy cow, what a way to end this season. So I know I've been doing a bit of complaining about the FPC these last few weeks, but that is not because of the actual competition. It's just because they don't have any online resources explaining how these final stages actually worked. So it was super annoying. But this made up for it a bit, didn't it? So absolutely beautiful day for this match. The vibe in the crowd was electric. I desperately wished I was there. What a spectacle. What an environment. Waikato, they ran out to a 10-0 lead before 10 minutes had gone by, but Canterbury tied it up right around that half-hour mark. We were still tied at the break, but it was the Canterbury winger, Yoshida, getting her team their first lead of the day, just her third career try at this level, and I imagine we're going to be hearing her name a lot more frequently in the future. So Waikato, they were back up by 2 as the final quarter, for the season, I realized with a bit of a jolt, got underway, and after a try got waved off, it was anyone's game, but gotta give it to them. It was Waikato women. After a crazy season, they would get their reward, winning the championship, their second, a bitter defeat for Canterbury in an incredible contest. FPC, next year, can I please be in charge of your website? Please, I'm begging you. 27-25 was our final in that one. That brings us right over, a lateral move to the NPC. The final round promised to be an absolute cracker with all kinds of things still very much up in the air. I actually made a little spreadsheet detailing all the possibilities for teams to move up or down in the playoff seeding, and then it turned into a complete bear, and just reading it all here became a pretty obviously stupid idea. Side note, and I've been meaning to mention this, one great thing about watching the NPC is, before the games start, they actually let us see and hear the warm-ups of the players. Oh no, my friends, of the broadcasters. They roll through a few angles, they show us a few different camera shots, they run through various graphics, and the comms go through their introductions to make sure they have their timings right. Sometimes they end up chit-chatting a bit. So last week, they did their intros, and then one said, okay, guys, after I do my one stat, I'm going to shut up. I know a lot of times I say I've got one thing, and then I do 3. So this time, I'm going to shut up. Classic. Love that stuff. Anyway, our Storm Week fixture this time was a huge one. It was Tasman still holding the Ranfurly Shield, of course, defending it at home versus Auckland. The comms started us off by saying that a biblical rain was on its way. It looked like we might be in for a bit of a weird one. Auckland apparently asked if a few All Blacks could be released to them for this match, and not only was the answer, sorry, no, they also had an undisclosed illness sweep through their team. They literally had to fly in a backup tight head that morning just to fill out the roster. So the Mako, meanwhile, they went full noise as you'd expect, and they did get at least one All Black, with Finlay Christie getting the start. The conditions were definitely as advertised. Both teams had trouble holding onto the greasy pill. Some individual brilliance, though, gave each team a converted try as we finished the first quarter. The second yellow card for Zarn Sullivan in 2 weeks looked like it was bad news for the visitors, and I have to say, Angus Gardner was doing a great job marshalling this game, as always. It was 12-10 at the intermission. 2 penalty kicks from Willie Havili made it 18-10 with a half hour to go. He was on fire, by the way, just inching his team out more and more off the boot. Tabataba Nawai, he was everywhere, but after he took a knock and looked like he might go off the field, the comm said, I figured it would take a bulldozer to get him off the field, and sure enough, in the final quarter, there he was, getting a massive turnover. The Mako looked Really good. With about a quarter hour to go, I admit it had become borderline comical. Like, they probably shouldn't have even played in these conditions. Like, nobody could keep their feet. Didn't matter if you had an open channel right in front of you, you'd just fall. And there was a 30% chance at least that you'd knock it on in the process. But give them credit, Tasman. They somehow managed to play tight defense, kept their guests going backwards at all times, and the comm said, quote, with 10 minutes to play, I think it's safe to say that the Shield will remain, unquote, a great win for the Mako and really bad news for Auckland. 31-17 in this one. So, that set us up for the final round in earnest of this year's NPC. It kicked off with Northland hosting Otago. Otago still had a mathematical chance to sneak into the top 8, but they would need a win with a bonus point to keep those hopes alive. The Taniwha, they had other ideas, however, and cruised out to a 21-10 lead by halftime, but then they just kind of seemed to run out of gas. Otago started doing everything right, and they got themselves in bonus point territory with maybe still 10 minutes to go. Final turnover saw the visitors get what they needed to stay alive, rising to 7th on the ladder before the rest of the weekend played out, 28-31 at full time in that one. Manawatu, they were hoping to get a second win this season playing at home against Counties Manukau, but alas, it was not in the cards. Thus ended another difficult season for the team we call the Turbojacks, a resounding 26-45 loss in Palmerston North, and I have a feeling there's going to be some major changes this offseason. The sad Southland Stags, they were back at Rugby Park for North Harbour, who were still on the outside looking in, but did have a shot if things fell their way. Of course, Southland, they had the full Scottish marching band out there once again. Was that cacophonous din the inspiration that led them to a 40-0 lead after just a half hour? Inevitably, Harbour did make some inroads, but the Stags, they weren't letting up either. It was a whopping 59-21 entering the final quarter. Are we sure this is Southland? Did I go to a different bizarro world? 59-35 was your final score. A lovely way to finish off a year that otherwise was mostly based in futility for the Stags. Wellington versus Hawke's Bay. That was one of the biggest fixtures this weekend, pitting the Comps number 2 team against the number 5, with only 3 table points separating them. The Magpies came out hot, getting 21 points to the host 0, but then I don't even know. They just kind of fell apart. Like, Wellington zoomed all the way back, overtook them, and ended up with a massive 46-28 victory. This is the worst possible way for Hawke's Bay to enter the postseason. What's even up with them right now? Bizarre. Canterbury, they finished off the season at home against Waikato, needing a win to see another week, which sounds kind of bleak when you say it that way. Anyway, a nice crowd on hand at the Apollo Project's stadium. Despite exchanging yellow cards in the first half, the hosts led 17-7 at the break. I've said it before, only half jokingly, Waikato, they haven't been the same since they lost Bodine Waka, and it was a frustrating end to the regular season, 36-19 away. Finally, we had 2 games on Sunday, including Auckland hosting sneaky good Bay of Plenty. Once again, Bay of Plenty just pipped it at full time. They've been incredible all year, and yet somehow I simply didn't notice. It's like a weird superpower or something. So this one was as close as it could be. Auckland losing their final home game of the regular season by a heartbreaking 24-26. But the biggest match of the weekend in the NPC, our obvious game of sorry, a little cough there. It was, of course, Tasman back playing again after just 4 days of rest, hoping to put the Ranfurly Shield in a locked cabinet if they could hold on to it against red-hot Taranaki Bulls, who've been quietly building all year after taking home the trophy last season. Tasman, they brought in Ethan Blackadder at 8 and David Havili at 12 to complement his brother at fly half, and the Mako looked loaded for bear, as we say in the States. On the Bulls side, I was distressed to see no Jason Patras anywhere in the 23 for the 3rd straight week, and yet they still haven't mentioned it. Why won't they tell us if he's injured and what's going on? That meant that Josh Jacob, he would be running the show presumably for the full 80, and they obviously have a ton of talent, including the man whose name I've avoided attempting to say all year, but now is as good a time as any. Jacob Ratamaituvuki Neepkins, he was again starting at fullback. Nailed it! And I was fired up for this one. It's worth noting, he got his start with his team 4 years ago when he scored 2 tries in a game where they took the Shield off of Canterbury. So we had maybe Little muscle memory involved as well. Quote, Jesse Peretti, this guy's been around the block, unquote, said the comms. And yeah, but I still love that guy. Kind of glad he's playing for someone else's team now, though. So it started to look grim for Tasman, down 3-17 at the end of the first quarter. They must have felt lucky to make it 8-23 at the break. The comms went on, quote, under a brooding sky, William Havili narrows it to an 8-point lead, unquote, and Kini Naholo making an unselfish pass for, the first time I've ever noticed. He cashed in with a backbreaker of a try for the Bulls. It was 15-35 with a half hour to go. Tasman, they seemed to panic as the pressure of time bore down. There was so much at stake. There's a reason Taranaki are the reigning champs, taking the shield and positioning themselves nicely for an advantageous playoff run. But where, my friends, where is Jason Patras? Final score in this one, 29-45. I can't tell you how big it was for the Bulls to grab the shield on the last day of the season. Just incredible. And as we've seen, it definitely seems to have some serious juju. Will Taranaki ride that wave to a repeat championship? So, my friends, that was a wrap on the 2024 regular season. Now it's down to our quarterfinalists. The unlucky six this season were Manawatu at the very bottom with 1 win and 10 table points. We had 3 lands in a row after that, Northland, Southland, and Auckland. But North Harbour and surprisingly Otago were the 2 that just missed out, despite having 24 and 26 points. I recall last week how the comms were saying how dangerous Harbour would have been in the playoffs, so there, might have been a collective sigh of relief from our postseason contenders. It's an incredible quarterfinal round that we've got in store this weekend, with Wellington hosting Counties Monaco. If I was ever going to lay a wager on an 8 seed upsetting a number 1, this would definitely be it. Then, of course, sneaky Bay of Plenty. They'll host sputtering Hawke's Bay. The reigning champs, Taranaki, host the winners from a few years back in Waikato. And then finally, Tasman host Canterbury. The Mako will be fuming about losing the shield and the top seed. It could get ugly if they get players back from various injuries. If you've been missing out on this competition all year, try to tune in this weekend. It's going to be awesome. So, that brings us over to the URC, a competition that's already provided plenty of surprises in just its first 2 rounds, including Cardiff being tied with Leinster at the top of the table, the Stormers on 0 points, and of course Zebre in the top 8 ahead of Munster based on their head-to-head results. How fun is that? Anyway, this weekend, your game of the week was Cardiff hosting the reigning champion Glasgow Warriors, and boy, did it deliver. Took shape slowly, Glasgow looking like they were planning to sort of sleepwalk to an easy victory, but the home crowd really got behind their team. They clawed their way back to within 4 with plenty of time left. Glasgow, though, they came out of their stupor eventually and really just brought the hammer down. It was a heavy-handed 36-52 final score. Sione Tuapolatu garnering Tom Shanklin's praise as the player of the match, and no wonder. So elsewhere around the Irk, we had one I was looking forward to, my Connacht away at Scarlets, where several players were back in action. The Scarlets welcomed Sam Lousy back into the starting lineup, while Connacht were pleased to have Undiaki back in the mix. So nice of him to join in. Must have been a special occasion or something. Anyway, only 12 minutes in, Gareth Rhys-Owens was saying, things are going from bad to worse, as the home team followed up a boneheaded move on their own try line to gift wrap the opening try for Connacht by preventing a player from taking a quick action off of 50-22, resulting in a yellow card. Have Scarlets become the most snake-bit team in the ORC? Will that round 1 draw look like the high point of this season in a few months? Well, of course, scratch all that, all predictions wrong, or double your money back, because after looking like a horror show for a quarter hour or so, Scarlets, they roared back. The home team took their first lead of the night. Never would I have thought this one would come down to the wire, but there we were, Connacht calling for the sticks with the game on the line and their primary kicker already resting his heels. But the kick was good, as the comms said, quote, a knife into the Scarlets' hearts, unquote, and boy, howdy. A muffed restart by Sam Costello proved the final nail in the coffin. My Connacht squeaked out of the Parky Scarlets with the tiniest of wins, 23-24. And much like I said about Julia, I think I need to do a wellness check for Hugh. Woof. Anyway, speaking of wellness checks, here's another one. We had the Lions hosting winless Edinburgh. I was already getting kind of worried for the Craigman and his team. Like, if they start the season 0-3, is that already too big a hole to escape? I can't even remember what the reference is from, but I always think, dig up, stupid. Anyway, I didn't actually manage to tune into this one until late, and it was not a pretty sight. Edinburgh getting mopped up by the Lions, who were rampant in a bit of painful irony. It was a massive final scoreline, 55-21. Within hours, I saw the articles asking if the Edinburgh head coach was on the hot seat, and he better be, right? So over at Loftus, we had the Bulls welcoming Ulster. Johan Krobler and David Creel, they were both getting their 50th caps for their team. Two great servants, the comms announced. The Bulls, they had a one-score lead, but a yellow card against the Ulstermen made it 21-7. Heading into the lockers, it wasn't until very late that the visitors would score again. They took their time about it, but it was another high-scoring win for the Bulls, or the Bombs, I guess, 47-21 by that double whistle. Benetton, they were hoping to get into the win column at home against Leinster. I mean, maybe the Leinster players would all be laughing too hard at Johnny Sexton's, quote, autobiography, unquote, where he decided to open his mouth and remove all doubt, rather than being thought a fool, to paraphrase Mark Twain. Leinster, they got 4 unanswered tries in the first half, and... What? Huh? Oh, sorry. I suppose the good news for Benetton was that they didn't end up getting shut out entirely. It's hard to say how much credit they deserve for it, but they kept the home team from scoring again until there were only a few minutes left. Either way, another ho-hum game from the world's least interesting team, 5-35 was your final score in Treviso. The Dragons, they were back at Rodney Parade for the Baby Sharks. Don't worry, I'm not going to do the song. A try right before halftime made it 22-12. With any other team, you might have felt, hey, that's a pretty good margin, but I had that Dragons feeling again. Sure enough, it was 22-26 with a half hour remaining, and the Dragons weren't quite done yet, though. So regular listeners will know. I always tend to root for the underdog. It's just built in, I guess. And the Dragons are always kind of scratching that itch, I suppose. So they held a tenuous 30-26 advantage deep in their own territory with less than 4 minutes showing. I was, fist bumping the air at every positive moment. How big would it be getting another win so early in the season? We were down to one final play, a scrum to the visitors under the purple-gray skies over Newport, but we were always headed for heartbreak. A try right under the post close to 5 minutes after full time saw the end of the Dragons' hopes for the evening, a gut punch, but perhaps a predictable one, 30-33 all told. That one hurt. So Zebre, they were at the palace, nay, the fortress that is Stadio Sergio Lafranchi, to face the Stormers, but it was back to business as usual, the visitors shutting out their hosts as the final quarter got underway. Much like their Italian counterparts in Treviso, though, Zebre managed to avoid being shut out entirely, but it was still a complete and thorough beatdown, 5-36 by the end. Finally, Munster, they managed to limp their way back to Cork to take on Ospreys, and I doubt it was raining anywhere else in the world, because surely this is how much precipitation can actually exist in total at any one time, right? Also, all week I'd been hearing how the Ospreys should be very afraid of a Munster team this angry and this hurting. And to draw a line under that thought, Munster scored, I believe, the quickest try I've ever seen to open the game. I had to wonder how the Ospreys would react after such a calamitous start. Well, the answer was not well. And to be fair, conditions like this, only the Fijian Drua could play in this, right? It was 18-0 at the break and a soggy 23-point shutout by the end. Quote, in the eye of a storm in Cork, Munster find a little bit of calm, unquote, said the comms. Very nicely done. So, of course, over in jolly old England, we had the Premiership. Your game of the week was, in fact, the first game of round 3. It was the rebranded champions, Northampton, taking on my Harlequins. It was an exciting one. The Saints, they showed a really cool tap-and-go play that I could only describe as NFL style. That led to their first score, but Marcus Smith, he had a brace before the half-hour mark, even just back and forth all day long. Northampton, they had the first lead as we entered the final quarter, and it was Agent Furbank setting up Ollie Slightholme to build it further. My Quins just basically ran out of time. It definitely felt like one of those games where whoever had the ball last would probably win. A valiant effort, but a poor start to the season. I just don't know what to think about the Harlequins at this stage. Final score, 33-29. Elsewhere around the league, we also had Sale versus a potentially rejuvenated Gloucester team, but Sharks were too much this time, winning a minor shootout, 31-27. Bath, they dropped their first match of the year to the incomprehensible Bristol Bears, 26-36. Okay, everyone say it with me. Newcastle lost again, this time to Leicester 10-42, and Saracens more than doubled up, visiting Exeter 29-14. That means Sarries remain the only unbeaten team in the Premiership. Leicester, Bath, Saints, and Sharks are all 2-1, and it's only Newcastle and Exeter sitting on that goose egg. Way too early to draw any conclusions, though, and you know what? I can say that conclusively. So, over in France, it was round 5 out of 1,216 in the top 14. The game of the week was my lovely Border Beagles, UBB, taking on Bayonne. On this paper, this should have been an easy one for Bordeaux, as Bayonne are notoriously poor on the road, even by top 14 standards. Bayonne came in 1-23 on the road in their last 24 outings. Oh, and by the way, they had never beaten UBB away in their entire history, but you know what? This is the top 14, where the crazy is normal. And it was a lackluster 15-10 as we went into halftime. Some serious chippiness in this game as well. It ended up involving what might have been the closest thing to an actual fight I've ever seen in a rugby match, besides like low-def 4x3 footage on YouTube. So a gorgeous drop goal by Johnny Segond that got Bayonne within 7 very late, but Bordeaux, they were able to salt away win just barely, holding on despite a bit of a howler from Louis Biabaré, keeping their home streak alive against Bayonne 30-27. Great stuff. Elsewhere around the top 14, newcomers Vannes, they were home and just barely lost to Racing 24-27. The Drink Boxes welcomed Montpellier to the capital and won 29-20. La Rochelle, they were hosting Lyon, and I had originally thought about this one for the game of the week, but there was no commentary of any kind, and they didn't even have the referee mic on, as sometimes happens. Like, I'm a hardcore rugby fan, but not to the extent where I want to watch the silent film version, okay? So at least they could have had someone banging away on a honky-tonk piano or something. Like, come on, make it more entertaining. Either way, turned out to be a walkover, 43-22 by the end, so the choice worked out well. We also had Perpignan versus Pau, definitely one for the purists, as they say. Perpignan winning 11-10. Cast, they somehow handed Toulouse their second consecutive loss, 28-23. And then finally on Sunday, Clermont just managed to squeak one by Toulon, another one-point game, 19-18 to close out round 5. So, interestingly, we had two other random international fixtures. I say random because I knew nothing about them, and no disrespect, both of these were games I would have loved to watch. So on Saturday, the Latvia women welcomed Norway to what one place told me was Baldone Stadium, a venue that serves as a rugby pitch as well as a baseball park. How cool is that? But actually, once again, I have to question the World Rugby website because A, they didn't even post the score after the fact. I had to hunt for it, and B, when you do search for the result, you find that the match was actually played at Ogre City Stadium, which is the single coolest name I've ever heard of. In any event, it was a complete blowout, Latvia laying 50 on the Norwegians in a shutout. Ouch. And then finally, the Chile men's team faced off against Brazil, and I swear, as I'm writing this, there's still no result available. The World Rugby site says it took place on October 5th. No searches I've done have yielded anything. If you caught that one, please get in touch. Let me know what happened. I would love to know. Well, by that music you will know it's time for this week's Diamond in the Ruck Award. This week, the award goes to Josh Jacob. Mr. Jacob, you have proven yourself this year to be a worthy successor to the King, Jason Potras, and your leadership and points off the boot this weekend made for an historic turn of events for your team. You've placed your team in great position to make a nice run at a repeat title in the NPC. Mr. Jacob, congratulations to you, for you are this week's Diamond in the Ruck. Well done, sir. Okay, that brings us to our updates and previews. You know what? I'm not even listing it all here. I have an idea that I've hinted at for next week's show. I've kind of mentioned it a couple of times. I think I am going to do it next week. So details will be forthcoming on all your socials in the next couple of days. So keep an eye out for what's on tap. By the way, the final round of the WXV, that probably tops the list. But oh my word, there's just so much more. Oh, and you know what else happened this week? The PWR got started. I completely missed it, but I will rectify that in short order. Anyway, what else we got here? We got we got the ending, my friends. That does it for another week. Thank you so much for listening. What a weekend, right? Like, October may already be my favorite month in general, but as I said last week, I think it's also time for the best rugby as well. What an incredible couple weeks we've already had. So, to all of you across the globe, cheers, talk to you soon, and be well.
It gives me great pleasure to be here today.
Oh, it does, Nate. You want to tempt the wrath of the whatever from high atop the thing?